Welcome back everyone. I've got an exciting video for you today. I'm going to show you how I transformed this old rusty saw from this into this. Oh yeah. Now if you're anything like me, you've probably been to garage sales and you've seen these saws for sale for $5 or $10. Sometimes they're even giving them away for free. That's how I got these saws. I really want to work on some projects in the future that only require hand tools and no power tools. So it made sense for me to finally take these saws out and try to restore them. So I'm going to walk you through the entire process, start to finish. We're going to take this blade apart, we're going to get the rust off, we're going to sharpen it, and I'm going to talk about all the different products I tried to use when refinishing the handle. There are so many stains and oils and varnishes and waxes to choose from. Sometimes I don't even know where to start. And you're going to see that I picked the wrong products several times in this video. But by the end, I found something that worked really well, and I'm going to share that with you. And like I said, I actually plan on using this thing, so we're going to do some testing, and we're going to see how well it works. Okay, let's get started. So step 1, get the handle off the blade, and tackle all this rust. I was a little concerned that the bolts might be seized together, but they actually came apart pretty easily, despite all the rust. So once I got those off, I put them in vinegar, and I let them soak for about 12 hours. And while that was soaking, I went to work on getting the rust off this blade. And I decided to start with a scrub pad before trying sandpaper. So after laying the beat down on this pad for about 15 minutes, yikes, made a little bit of progress. You can kind of see the writing there. Scrub pads weren't doing it. I tried some fine steel wool as well. That wasn't doing it. There was some sort of weird gunk on this blade as well, so definitely needed the sandpaper. I started with a worn out 150 grit sandpaper. I like to recycle my old sandpaper from other projects, and they actually come in pretty handy for stuff like this. And because it's worn out, I find that it doesn't cause as much scratching as it would if I used new sandpaper. So this is after about 20 minutes of sanding, maybe a little bit less actually. I got a lot of the rust off. Clearly it's old and pitted and damaged, but I believe once I get this nice and smooth and maybe put some wax on there or something, I should be able to get that gliding pretty smooth. I'm being careful not to sand too much of the teeth. Probably be a little bit more meticulous about that part. I don't want to round over these edges here. Now I said what I said about the teeth because originally I didn't think I was going to have to sharpen this saw, and I was a little bit weary about sharpening because I've never done it before. So I thought if I just took a brass wire brush and cleaned the teeth real good with some vinegar, I'd be good to go. But the saw wasn't very sharp. The other reason I was reluctant to sand the teeth, and I think it's a legitimate reason, I might affect what's called the set of the saw. You've probably noticed on saw blades, teeth have an alternating bend left and right. That's called the set of the saw. And if a saw blade doesn't have that, it'll cause a lot of binding when you're trying to cut through your piece of wood. So if I were to sand those down, I'd lose my set. Now you can actually reset the saw with a saw set tool, but I didn't have one of those. I am happy that I just went with the scrub brush because this saw had a really good set to it and the sharpening ended up going really well, which I will get to. But first, it's time to wash this blade with Windex, or in my case, the Dollarama version, Frank. Now once again, I'm using sandpaper for this stage, and this is going to help to neutralize the vinegar that I was using earlier to wash the blade. And this is really important because vinegar will continue to corrode metal even after you rinse it off with water. So at this point, things were looking pretty good. It only took me 3 hours to get to this point, which I felt was pretty reasonable considering what it looked like when we started. There's a fair bit of pitting on this blade, but overall the metal still feels pretty thick and solid, so I don't think it'll be a problem. And it is feeling very nice and smooth. I think once I get some wax on here, we're going to be good to go. Speaking of which, I'm going to use Minwax Paste Finishing Wax for this. And this is to prevent any further rusting. Because after all that work, I don't want this thing to rust. And believe it or not, bare metal is very good at rusting, even if it's in a dry location like a shed. Because condensation will eventually get it. Now this is pretty self-explanatory. Just put some wax on an old rag and start rubbing it in. I let it dry for about 5-10 minutes, and then I buff it out, And that's it. Now at this point, I decided to switch gears and start working on the handle. We will get to the sharpening later, and also the hardware. I started by inspecting the handle. I didn't see any cracks anywhere. There's no chips. It's really ugly, but I think it's possible to sand this down and save it. So I started by using a razor blade just to scrape off all the old varnish and this weird pink spray paint. And you can see, because it's so old, it's just chipping right off. And it was actually really easy to sand down. I started with 150 grit sandpaper and then switched to 220 grit. And overall, it was fairly uneventful. You can see some really old dark staining in there, which I wasn't able to get out. But sometimes that's just part of refinishing something that's really old. So let's talk about everything I used to try to refinish this handle, starting with this Minwax oil-based stain. Now this is not a varnish or an oil, this is just a stain. And you can either wipe it on or brush it on, but you do eventually need to wipe it off. Now I should have known better than to use this product, because this product can be very unforgiving when it comes to scratches or any sort of blemishes. It will really accentuate them, and you'll see that after I wipe this stain off. So brushing it on, it actually looks pretty good, right? But here's what it looks like when I wipe it off. So that was looking good until I wiped all the excess stain off. And this just does not look really nice at all. So, I think I'm going to try another product. This is a stain and varnish 2-in-1 combo. I've bashed these products before, but I think it might work with this. Alright, so there was a lot of finger tapping there because I've had problems with this product before. And I actually made a whole other video about a similar product, different brand, but same 2-in-1 combo. And I was faced with problem after problem after problem. I think I'll leave a link in the description for that video. It was one of my older videos. It's not very good, but there are a ton of comments on it from people having these same problems with this product. Like I said, different brand, but same. It's a 2-in-1 combo. And it might be useful for you guys to go check that out and read those comments, because I know I wasn't the only one. So if I had problems with this in the past, why did I choose it for this project? I guess I keep thinking it has to work. It has to work, right? And once again, it looks great going on, but I forgot one of the main problems I had with my previous projects, and that's how quickly it becomes tacky. Now with this handle, there's a lot of curves and edges and nooks and crannies and whatnot, and if you spend too much time brushing this on, certain sections will start getting tacky, and when you go over it, you'll get brush strokes. And also, as it's drying, I was getting a lot of runs, drips, leaks, whatever you want to call them, and it actually looks pretty good on camera, but in person, yeah, there were a lot of drips that I ended up needing to sand off. Let's take a look. So apparently I forgot to record what it looked like when it dried. It was a satin finish, so it wasn't too glossy. But this is how much sanding I had to do to get rid of all the blemishes. So the brush strokes and the drips. But I decided to continue with the same product, put a second coat on, see if I could save it. But now we're dealing with more drips, as you can see here. And now it's looking kind of patchy, with some dark spots and some lighter spots, which can kind of look cool sometimes, but not always. So once again, I did a little more sanding after that second coat to get rid of those drips. I was being very careful not to sand too deep. Still wasn't really happy with the way it looked, but I decided to try a clear coat to see if I could save this. And for this, I wanted to try the Minwax Wipe-On Poly, which I've used for tables before, and it's a pretty easy product to use. Now I started with a wipe-on because it does say that you can do that and does work for tables. However, this stuff does get tacky fairly quickly, and as you can see, I'm holding it with my hands, so when it started getting tacky, I was leaving a lot of fingerprints on this thing, and that just wasn't going to fly. So I set things up again and went with a brush on for this, and I'm going to play my initial reaction and I'm going to add a few more points to it.
Well, guys, after all that, I don't like the look of it. I did a little bit too much sanding after the second coat, and it kind of wore off some of that brown varnish. I didn't think it would be so obvious, but it is, and yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of doing all that work to it.
I've got a few more clips to show you guys, but I just wanted to point something else out that I didn't mention. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a lot of little micro scratches in this. And I've had this problem before with the wipe-on polys, specifically with the high gloss wipe-on. This stuff dries very thin, which can be good for a wipe-on, but it still shows a lot of the scratches from sanding in between coats. So I'd probably need to put several coats of this on to get rid of those scratches. Either way, too much work, not the right product for this handle.
So, I'm going to do some more sanding, and I think I'm going to switch to a Danish oil of some kind. Let's see what happens. I think maybe I can blend things together with the old and the new, and maybe it'll look okay. I have no idea. At this point, I'm kind of giving up, but sometimes I get the best results when I do this. So I'll just continue this and we'll see what happens. I've gone rogue. I've gone completely rogue here. Yikes. Well, I sanded the faces down. I don't know, it's kind of got a unique look, I guess. I think I'm going to try this on the face. Well, actually all over, really. So here goes nothing. I'm hoping that maybe the cherry color will look kind of cool in contrast with the darker walnut or espresso style stain, but I'm really not sure. Not too cherry-ish. It actually smells like cherries, surprisingly. I mean, that looks kind of cool, I guess. Looks like it's going on the varnish sections pretty good as well. By the way, it's 1:30 in the morning. I just really needed to get this project done and out of the way, so that's why I've kind of gone rogue. I can always work on this again in the future. A little bit of a fail at this point, but who knows, maybe it'll inspire other people to try different things. So after my little panic session last night, things are actually looking pretty good. It might be a little rustic for some people's taste, but I think it shows a lot of character in the history of the wood. I love this cool grain pattern here. That was definitely covered up when I used the poly shades here. And I think it's going to look pretty cool once I get this hardware on there. Earlier I had mentioned something about using a Danish oil. This was my first choice, but the can was completely dried up. But hey, maybe that's a good thing, because I actually really like how this turned out. Now this can, I actually read the instructions this time. It says to put some feed and wax over top of this finish. So that's what I'm going to do. So I know that was probably really long and boring, so thank you for watching if you made it this far. I do think this is really valuable information because there's a lot of channels out there that do restoration videos, but they don't show you what products they're using. I don't know if it's trade secret stuff or what, but by showing you everything I'm doing, I'm hoping it'll save you time and money. So after all that work, it just comes down to these two products, Restorer Finish and Feed and Wax. Let's take a look at the hardware and this cool little medallion thing. So I ended up soaking the hardware in vinegar for about 12 hours. And this helped to loosen up a lot of the old rust. And I was able to scrub it real good with a wire brush. I did a little bit of sanding by hand, and this is what they ended up looking like. Not too bad, but I felt like I could do a little bit better with a rotary tool and maybe this brass wire wheel. So I gave that a shot, and funny enough, it seemed like the brass from the wire wheel was rubbing off onto the steel hardware. So I switched to a steel wire wheel, and that seemed to do the trick. Much better. One of the bolts has quite a bit of pitting, but that's okay. It is an old tool after all. Now for the medallion, I actually switched back to the brass wire wheel because part of the medallion was brass colored and some of it was not. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be, but I thought it would be interesting if I used the brass wire wheel on it and make the whole thing look kind of brass colored. And it kind of worked.
and it looks really nice. So there you go. And finally, let's talk about the sharpening. Now, I've never sharpened a saw before, and I'm going to tell you right now, it was a lot easier than I thought. I'm using a regular saw sharpening file here. This is one of those triangular files. Now, for these files, you need certain sizes for certain saws with different sized teeth. If you want to make sure you're buying the right files for your saw, take a look at what TPI your saw is. It should be stamped on there somewhere. This one is a 5.5. And then go to Lee Valley. I feel like they do the best job of advertising which file is meant for what. So I'm using a regular saw sharpening file, and you can see here on the Lee Valley website, they actually list that this file is good for 4 to 5.5 TPI. And that's what this saw is. If you have a saw that is a number 8 or a 9, you'd be getting the extra slim saw sharpening file. And again, it's listed right here, and it should be stamped somewhere on your saw, like this. So I felt like this was the best way to show you how to shop for a file. I hope that helps. You don't necessarily have to get it from Lee Valley, but I couldn't find proper descriptions on Amazon, so I won't be leaving a link for this because I want to make sure you guys get the right file. So apparently the reason why this saw was so easy to sharpen is because it's a ripping saw, and all I have to do is hold the file perpendicular to the saw and start filing away. If you're trying to sharpen a crosscut saw, you're going to have to place your file on an angle, and I haven't done one of those yet. Now there's a few more steps I could have done, which I didn't, but this worked really well. I thought I'd better do a close-up here so you guys can see what I'm doing. I've got these 4 teeth done already. I haven't done these ones yet, but I thought this would be a pretty good comparison. Most of the unsharpened teeth look like this, where they're kind of rounded over, and you don't have a really nice square edge like this one that I just filed. And that's what I'm going for. And by the way, it took me about 45 minutes to sharpen this saw. I did have to make many passes, and you know, it's my first one. I just want to make sure I was doing it right. But take a look at these teeth. I know I showed you this shot earlier, but wow. I mean, you could tell these are sharp just by looking at them. I know, I sound excited because I've never done this before, and I'm kind of surprised it worked. Alright guys, I'm going to stop dragging this on. Let's get this handle on this blade so we can test this bad boy out. Let's keep this part nice and simple. Slide your handle on. Reinstall your nuts and bolts. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's see how solid she is. Oh, rock solid. Feels real nice here too. Wow. And let's try this thing out. Oh yeah! So believe it or not, I've never actually used a ripping saw, other than one of those small Japanese saws, and they really didn't have that much power. Not compared to this thing. So I wanted to see how well this thing could work, and this is how I decided to test it. I'm using a 2x6 here, and of course it's only 1.5 inches thick, but that's okay. And I measured down 12 inches, and I wanted to see how fast I could rip through 12 inches of this 2x6. All right, let's see what happens. First try. So it was a little bit tricky to get it going, but once I got it started, it was eating through this like butter. You can see the teeth just spitting out all that sawdust. That's exactly what it's supposed to do, and I was absolutely blown away by how well this worked. I am going to speed it up now, but I'm going to keep track of the time. So total time to rip 12 inches was 1 minute and 40 seconds. Not bad. Woo. All right. Not bad. So like I said, it was a little hard to get going because those teeth are so big. And I probably should have started on an angle instead of straight on. And that's very true. I ended up trying it a second time, this time on an angle, and I got it started within 1 or 2 strokes, which I think is really good. Now all I need is a proper workbench.
I can definitely say I've never ripped a piece of wood by hand like that. Not that easily anyways. I have a Japanese pull style saw, but it definitely did not work the way this one did. There you have it. Was it worth it? I'm gonna go with yes.
So what do you guys think of this type of video? I actually really enjoyed this. Thank you to all my viewers and all my members on Patreon. Any form of support goes a long ways to keeping this channel going, and I really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Oh yeah!